Spy is weak. Stuff you hear all the time when people talk about Spy. He's said to be the weakest class in the game. He dies easily when spotted and can't reasonably fight the other classes. But the thing is, that's by design. Spy is literally a class built around stealth and mind games. You don't want the enemy to be able to keep track of your whereabouts. It makes sense he's not as good in combat as most other classes, as he's supposed to avoid it in the first place. From the perspective of the enemy player, dealing with the Spy is often less about beating him in a fight, and more about catching him in the act. Once you find them, it's usually an easy kill, and that's the point. Of course, Spy doesn't instantly die when someone looks at him, but using movement and mind games to get away from a player that did notice you is part of the mind games the class is built around. You made the enemy lose track of your whereabouts through trickery and stealth, and the fact you could have died so quickly is what makes it so satisfying to pull off those getaways. Inversely, actually beating someone in an active fight as Spy is also made satisfying knowing how weak the class typically is in combat, and winning those fights usually involves some form of trickery. Simply pulling out your gun and shooting them can catch people off guard when they don't expect the helpless Spy to fight back. Maybe you use the gun to take advantage of a player with lower health, or a pyro trying to chase you from far away. Trick stabs are also part of that equation. You literally take advantage of the enemy's overconfidence to trick them into exposing their back. They play into the trickery of Spy. Knowing the enemy had the advantage but beating them anyway due to sheer skill or outsmarting them is deeply satisfying.
Everything Spy can do, Sniper does better.
Yes, Sniper is in significantly less danger than the Spy while being able to get picks, but Spy still has a very clear purpose of being in the game. His ability to near freely enter enemy territory keeps players on their toes, as he is quickly able to punish players who get too complacent about their safety. His ability to show up practically anywhere prevents places like a covered sentry nest from being absolutely safe. There is always the potential of a Spy attack.
Also, that saying about Sniper comes from 6v6 on symmetrical maps where half the classes aren't used anyway, which makes Sniper more powerful there.
Playing Spy gives the sensation of being this trickster that hides in plain sight, messing with the enemy and taking advantage of them while they think they're safe. Brute strength isn't your greatest weapon, it's your mind. This kind of feeling can only really be pulled off in a game against real players, and why Spy against bots is pretty boring. TF2 isn't the only game that pulls this off. There are others like Among Us, Town of Salem, TTT, but those games entirely revolve around social deduction. Those sneaky bad guys are the main threat. In TF2, Spy is only one of the 9 classes the game revolves around. Spy is only part of the greater threat, and that's what makes him unique. No other game outside of social deduction has ever been able to pull off this feeling for me as well as the TF2 Spy. In other games, they usually feel more like a combat class with stealth mechanics than a class built around stealth entirely. Now, yes, because Spy is so reliant on taking advantage of the mistakes of enemy players, this of course comes with the issue of not only making him difficult to play, but his performance being reliant on the skill of the enemy more so than the other classes. This is an unfortunate side effect of how Spy is designed, and what can often make him feel weak. However, that can often just challenge your ability to mind game even more. These are smarter players, you have to adapt. And what is a trickster if they can't adapt? Spy also eating new players for breakfast isn't necessarily a bad thing. He's punishing their lack of awareness and helping them learn. It's tough love. Just buffing him to make him able to fight the other classes more reliably misses the point of making yourself hard to track in the first place. I mean, it's why people hate the Dead Ringer. The Spy's running directly at your team disguised as Scout. You know exactly what they're doing, but they just tank the damage and speed past you. You caught them in the act, you didn't fall for their disguise or fake death, but they get away with it anyway using brute force instead of confusing you. Yes, it's an aggressive alternate playstyle, but it isn't intuitive like Demo Knight where it makes sense he's going to charge you with the sword just by looking at him. Even if the Spy had no intention of fooling you with the disguise or fake death, it still feels like they're trying to trick you, failing to fool you whatsoever, and getting away with it regardless. Just making him flat out stronger can ruin this dynamic if not thought through carefully. And believe it or not, Spy actually has been buffed. Very significantly, in fact. When TF2 first released, there actually used to be a delay on backstabs. They wouldn't land the moment you clicked. It was only in February of 2009 where they were made instant, presumably because they were too difficult to hit on moving targets. However, at the same time, the angle was reduced from 180 degrees to 160 degrees. This was reverted less than 10 days later because people would just put their back to a wall. And you know that thing where cloaking gives a 20% damage resistance and makes debuffs wear off twice as fast? Yeah, that wasn't a thing until the gunmetal update in 2015, which also added quick disguising from other disguises, plus made the revolver reload not flashbang you. But that cloak reducing debuffs thing was super significant. Previously, if you got hit by fire, Dradi, milk, etc., there was literally no reason to cloak. It was useless. But that buff gave Spy more agency in those situations. And most significantly, in the Meet Your Match update in 2016, Spy's running speed was buffed. Yeah, Spy used to be the same speed as all of these guys for 8 years, and slower than Medic. We're all used to it now, but this was huge at the time. Nowadays, Spy can outrun most classes, disguise as Medic without the speed being wrong, and have the Scout disguise look less wrong. As well as just generally being able to get around the map faster. It's hard to imagine Spy being that slow, but he was for a long time. And these buffs were smart. They weren't just made to make him stronger, they were still careful to preserve his identity as a trickster that only sometimes gets into fights. Of course, I'm not saying Spy is balanced perfectly. First off, random crits. Only one of his stock weapons are even able to crit, and only one of his unlocks can as well. And considering his most lethal attack is a melee one, and melee crit rates are so high, it often makes backstabs feel redundant when most classes can one-shot you with their melee a good chunk of the time. TF2 is a goofy game on its own without random crits. They jeopardize the skill and learning of the game while barely contributing to its funny side. This is an opinion I've had for 10 years at this point. Another is post-spawn wall hacks. They weren't even in the game until 2016, and they were clearly made to help respawning players navigate to the fight, but they would be a great idea in almost any team game other than TF2, because it often just reveals spies more so than helping players navigate. Like, seriously, a tool that is supposed to conceal you can actually make your location more obvious just because of this mechanic. It can be played around by the spy, but it's unintuitive and pointless. Disguise glitches are also unintuitive. They can instantly expose a spy since those glitches don't occur with real players. Sometimes the spy is able to know when they're happening and fix it by switching disguise weapon, but in cases like the missing demo legs or missing pyro head, the spy has no way of knowing that their disguise looks wrong. Hit detection is also a mess. It can be played around somewhat, but it really sticks out after having played other games with much better hit detection even at higher ping. This does affect all classes to some extent, though it's especially frustrating with the knife. On both sides, to be fair. What? And then, of course, we have the spy countering unlocks. Some aren't so bad. Dradi and Milk are somewhat fine after the cloak was changed in gunmetal. Wishwhacker is stupid, but that's not a spy-specific issue. Razorback has an imbalance of effort, and Squimdrim already made a video about it. But I will say it is really funny to punish a Razorback sniper's complacency with the you-know-what. The home wrecker is the worst case, and honestly, my opinion has changed since this video. Pyro shouldn't be able to remove sappers at all, and this goes for the Neon as well. His job is to stop it getting to that point in the first place. It's not used by Pyros very often, but they shouldn't be able to do that at all. Then there's the Thompson. It's just kind of weak anyway, so whatever. Granted, the Spy also has the Spy skill, but it can sometimes make it easier for the Pyro to deny backstabs. Bicycle direct upgrade my arm. Of course, this only applies to unlocks, not stock weapons. Things like the flamethrower and sapper are fine because they are a core part of how that class works. But yeah, when people say Spy feels weak, I get it. The class is hard, and that's an unfortunate consequence of the game's age and how much the class relies on mind games. But I wouldn't want to sacrifice it for the sake of yet another combat character that has stealth elements. It's part of why I made Spy Psychology, to help new players over that initial barrier to entry and show off how fun the class can be once you understand it. He's not balanced perfectly, but he has an identity and a reason to exist within the game, instead of just disregarding him as weak because the class that doesn't like to get into fights struggles when getting into fights. And the fact that he feels weak, strangely enough, can make him feel all the more powerful when you stomp with him. To quote Hugo Martin, game director of Doom Eternal, "The power fantasy that is earned is greater than the one that is handed to you." But let me know what you think in the comments. Like the video if you like what you saw, and consider subscribing if you want to see more of my stuff. Spy is hard. It ain't for everyone, and that's okay. He may be weak, but that's by design. He's not a brute, he's a trickster.